daylight savings time, and hopefully we don't have anybody that is yet on their way. I remember when my first senior pastor, I was senior pastor at a pretty large church. We had 3 Sunday morning services that I have to preach, and I completely forgot daylight savings time. And I just got there, literally probably 5 minutes before I had to walk up and preach. And it was, I think it took about 10 years off my life. So I understand if you've ever done that. I have done that myself. So, well, we're looking at John 18 this morning, and this section is what is often referred to as the Passion of Christ. And it is very difficult for me to preach through. Because it's like watching a train wreck. And you just get this eyewitness look into the betrayal of Christ, the arrest, the beating, mocking, and crucifixion. And it's just hard to read, to see. And Jesus throughout it just stands out in stark contrast to any regular human being who would have been going through this. So it begins, or where we left off, I should say, last week, was Jesus' prayer for the disciples was that they are in, I am in them, in the disciples and Christians and even us today, and you are in me, so that they may be made completely one. And last week we talked about the unity that's so important. And this wonderful principle of unity is that as the church is united, now when we say united, it doesn't mean we all believe the same thing, doesn't mean we all like the same thing. We can dress differently. Some people today wear jeans, some ladies wear dresses. Doesn't matter really what you wear as long as you're wearing something, right? Cults and that sort of thing have uniformity. Everybody must be exactly the same. The Bible teaches unity. So unity is just, there's differences, but we are pulling together with a common purpose. And the reason is so that you may know, that the world may know that you have sent me and have loved them as you has loved me. And what's amazing here is this principle that says that God loves you and me to the same degree and extent that he loves Jesus. So if a member of the body is loved that much by God, who am I to treat them improperly? And that's what we looked at last week. So right on the hint that following that, it says, after Jesus had said these things, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley, where there was a garden. Now, this Kidron Valley here is kind of like they call it maybe like a wadi. And it would sometimes, in the rainy season, there'd be like a stream that flows through there, but most of the year it was dry. So it was like a dry stream bed, except for when it was wet. They crossed this valley, and there was a garden, and he and his disciples went into it. And the way the Greek reads here is the idea is it is probably a walled enclosure with one entrance and just this one entrance, one exit. They go into this place. And Jesus is leading the way. Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place. So what you see is Jesus isn't playing hard to catch. Jesus knows he's going to die soon. He knows he's going to be betrayed by Judas. He knows he's going to be betrayed, and the religious leaders will arrest him. So he makes it pretty easy. he goes to this place that Judas knew all about, and probably what it was is there was some, probably a wealthy owner owned this garden, and Jesus and his disciples often went and stayed there, and they probably slept there. So it was Passover, full moon. Passover is always on a full moon. So there's a full moon, and according to what they believed back then at Passover, is you had to remain close to the city. And so Jesus would not have retired to Bethany as he often did, because that was further outside the limits. And so this garden in Gethsemane was a place they often stayed. And often they would have stayed there probably during Passover. So Judas knew exactly where they would be. Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas took a company of soldiers. Now, a company of soldiers at this time, the Greek word there means it was somewhere between 200 and 600 soldiers. Okay? 200 to 600 soldiers, Roman soldiers, to arrest Jesus. And they bring with them some officials of the chief priests and the Pharisees, who came with lanterns, torches, and weapons. So you see, this is kind of the setting. They're in a walled garden. They've just taken the Passover meal. Jesus knows they're coming. So Jesus goes into this place. Judas knew where it was going to be. And they show up with not only the religious people, but also Jews and Gentiles to arrest Jesus. And they have somewhere between 200 and 600 soldiers that have come to arrest the King of Kings. They show up, even on a full moon, with lanterns, torches, and weapons. They wanted to show up in a really intimidating force, is what they had in mind. This is this. Then Jesus, knowing everything that was about to happen to him. Now this is what is absolutely amazing. Knowing everything that was about to happen to him. Now, let's just put it in modern day terms. Let's say, now years ago we hear the incident of, the Randy Weaver story at Ruby Ridge. Or maybe the David Koresh thing at the compound. But the idea is here you are, you're trying to be captured, and the government and armed people are outside your home, or have you locked in and want to capture you. So if the police and everybody else, say the military, are outside your home and they're armed and they're trying to get you, and you've done nothing wrong, what is your state of mind going to be like? You're probably going to be super nervous. You may be freaking out, actually, right? I mean, just think about the stress that would do to a normal human being. And you haven't done anything wrong. You're completely innocent. So then Jesus, knowing everything that was about to happen to him, went and hid in the bushes. Is that what it says? Does it say he put on his ghillie suit to blend in and hide? Ghillie suit, ladies, that's like really good camouflage, right? Here's Jesus. He's God. He's a total, what we'd say, a total stud muffin, right? He is a man's man, and here you see it. They're surrounded, 200 to 600 soldiers, with torches and lanterns and weapons. And what does Jesus do? And Jesus knows they're going to string him up and crucify him, pound nails into his arms and feet, and he's stripped naked, hung up on a cross. I mean, you can imagine all of it. Jesus went out and said to them, "Hey, who is it that you're seeking?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they answered. Now here's what's really interesting. am He. And the Greek literally reads, I am. It's ego eimon. And it's interesting that that's the word that Jesus chose to say. Now, let's just hold your finger here. And I want to just give a little history on this word, I am. It first comes up in the Old Testament with Moses. Moses says, God shows up to Moses and says, lead my people out of Israel. Moses says, well, who do I tell them that you are? Like, what is your name? I don't know. You appeared in a burning bush, but who are you? So it says, then Moses said to God, behold, I'm going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now they may say to me, what is his name, and what shall I say to them? So God replies. God said to Moses, I am. Now this is, just so you understand here, the Old Testament was primarily written in Hebrew, but it was then translated into Greek, and that was called the Septuagint. And in Jesus' day, most people used the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, because that's the language they spoke. And a lot of the quotations in the New Testament come from the Septuagint. Paul will do that. That's sometimes why Paul will quote the Old Testament, and it may be a little different, slightly different wording than what you read in an Old Testament passage, because our Old Testament is translated from Hebrew. All right? But it's the same Greek word. Ego eimi. And it is what they call the tetragrammaton. It is the name of God. Or Yahweh would be another name. People used to use the word Jehovah, but as we uncovered the Dead Sea Scrolls and learned more about the Hebrew language, the word Jehovah never existed. It's what we would call Yahweh. And this is the name that God calls himself. And it's a title reserved only for God. God says to him, I am who I am. And he said, thus shall you say to the sons of Israel, I am, has sent me to you. God furthermore said to Moses, thus shall you say to the sons of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial name to all generations. So this is a really significant name of God. And Yahweh, that title is like the covenantal relationship of God with his people. It's kind of, don't push this too far, but you may all know me as Jeff, but my children know me as Dad. Or my little ones as Daddy. And I'm the same person, but those are two different names. And so the word Yahweh is a name that appeals to the fact of God's covenant responsibility to people who he never gives up on, no matter what they do. So this word I am is a very significant word or name for God. Now remember, in John 8, Jesus says that truly I tell you, before Abraham was, and he uses the same word, I am. So they picked up stones to throw at him. But Jesus was hidden and went out of the temple. Now, what you find here is, when Jesus said, I am, he was claiming to be God. That's the way you said it. Now, you have to understand, people say, well, if Jesus was really God, why doesn't it just somewhere plainly say in the Gospels, and why doesn't Jesus just say, I am God? Well, you have to understand something. That would not be culturally acceptable for anyone to do. Often the name of God wasn't even mentioned. Even today, Jewish people will not even write the word G-O-D. They'll put a G underscore D because it's out of reverence. And so Jesus would never have said, I am God, like that. He would say, I am the Son of Man. I am the Christ. I am the Son of David. And Jesus used all these titles. Or he would just say, I am, you see. Now, the people in his day, when he said, I am, they knew he was claiming to be God because they picked up stones. And why was Jesus crucified? Because he claimed to be God, which was blasphemy. So, Jesus says this name, when they come in, it's kind of a play on words, and it's clever and sneaky when Jesus says, I am. Alright? So here they are, 200 to 600 soldiers. The leading religious leaders in Judas is the guy, because they kind of needed Judas to know, hey, where's the teacher going to be on the night of Passover? And Judas would have known where he would stay. So this is just a little bit to understand the background here. So it says here, I am. Jesus told them. Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus told them, I am, they stepped back and fell to the ground. You got to see. So there's Jesus, okay? He's not hiding in the bushes. He knows that they're there. He walks out to see them. And they say, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. And he says, I am. And these people there that are coming to arrest him with their weapons and lanterns and everything else they have are immediately blown over by the power in his word. Knocked to the ground. I mean, it's amazing. They're there to arrest him, and they're still at the feet of Jesus. The Bible's going to tell us that every knee will bow. Every tongue will confess. And so here, and we don't know if it was just the front row. We don't know if it was all 200 to 600 soldiers. It could have been they all just went down like dominoes, maybe. But you got to think about this for a moment. Here they come, and you know, these soldiers, these are tough dudes, right? I mean, they've done a lot of bad stuff in their life. And they go to arrest Jesus, and he's not hiding like a coward in the bushes. The disciples are, or at least some of them are going to be in a little bit. And he walks out there with his shoulders back and his chin up. And he says, who are you looking for? And he says, I am. And they're all knocked down. And you could, you know, somebody in that group had to think to themselves, okay, now, we're trying to arrest this guy. And he just tells us he's God. And the power of his voice knocks us all down. Like, maybe we should be thinking twice about what we're doing here. You see. So even trying to arrest him, they're at his feet. Knocked to their feet. By just the power that Jesus had. See, and just, man, let me just say something. When you read this story, you know, too many times the church makes Jesus out to be more like a Mr. Rogers figure. But Jesus was a man's man. He was the ultimate man. I mean, you see the strength here. He doesn't say to the disciples, hey, go out there and see who's there. Jesus walks out there. He knew what was going to take place. Then he asked them again. Okay, now, this is what's kind of funny. Okay, and it implies they're all knocked down, clutching, lanterns maybe have been knocked over, their torches, who knows, maybe they burned the guy next to them because they fell with their torch, and their armor, and maybe some of them have soiled their armor, I don't know. But there they are, kind of in derision, right? And Jesus takes command of the situation. Okay, so as they're all getting up, and you can imagine dusting themselves off, another guy, man, where's that? You see my helmet? What's going on here? Jesus says, hey, who is it that you're seeking? Okay? And again, somebody, you can imagine that this time maybe the spokesman, is a little hesitant because who knows what he's going to say again that's going to knock them all over, right? And they say, Jesus of Nazareth, they say. And Jesus says, I told you, I am he, Jesus replied. So, if you're looking for me, he says, let these men go. And here you see the concern for Jesus' disciples. I mean, they're cowering like at least some of them, not Peter yet, as we'll see in a moment, they're cowering like schoolgirls. And Jesus says, you know what? You want me? Take me, but leave my guys here. This is to fulfill the words that he said, I've not lost one of those you've given me. In other words, Jesus physically protected his disciples when he was arrested. It's amazing. At my very best, I would be stuttering. And maybe I'd say, arrest one of them just so I have some company, someone to go with me. Right? Not Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate stutter from here. Then we move to Simon. And you can say what you want about Simon, but here you see, at least he has some courage at this point. Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, and it's probably the Greek word there, it's like a dagger, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. So in my mind, what I think happened, he pulls it out, and Peter goes to chop his head off. The man ducks, and off comes his ear. I mean, it's a crazy detail in this whole story. That this guy loses it, and you got to give it to Peter that at this point he hasn't betrayed Christ. He's in this, he's wanting to be strong and wanting to project Jesus. Now, John doesn't give us this detail here, but what we find is then Jesus bends down, picks up the man's ear, maybe dusts it off, puts it back on his head, and the man's immediately healed. Come on. You're trying to arrest this guy. He says the words, I am. He knocks you all down. His buddy cuts off this guy's ear. He puts the ear back on. It's insane, this situation. Didn't somebody think to themselves, wait a second, this is not your regular guy. There's something different about this guy. And then Jesus says to Peter, put your sword away. Am I not to drink the cup the Father has given me? Now this is really, really significant. Jesus knew the cup. What is the cup? The cup is God's wrath on sin. Okay? You have to understand the Old Testament. The Bible tells us for all that time, for 4,000 years, sin was merely covered. It was like, if there's a big stain on the floor and you can't get the stain out, you just throw a throw rug over top. Or kids, you're supposed to clean your room and you just shove everything under the bed. Right? It doesn't go away. It's still there. You just can't see it. That's it. For 4,000 years, the sin of humanity was just covered. And the picture here is, you have 4,000 years of history. The sin, okay? All this sin, the sin of the Old Testament, the horrible things that have been done. The sin of the Canaanites, where they would offer their babies to Moloch. It was a furnace that, in the belly of it was a furnace. They heated up and it had these arms that they'd heat up till they were red hot. And what they would do is they would throw their baby into the arms, and the baby in the pain would have this, what they call a sardonic grin, a grimace. And they'd have to play this music to drown out the cries of the baby. But this was often done. If a couple was short on money, or wanted to live a more comfortable lifestyle, they would offer one of their children to Moloch. And there thousands of children were slaughtered this way. I did a whole message on this a while ago where they dug up these urns of all these, from these babies that were offered as sacrifices. You had, before the flood, unbelievable wickedness across the earth. Bestiality, and everything you can think of going on. And that sin was just covered. Okay? And then, this cup, okay, it's the picture of this cup that contains all of the sin of the entire world. Alright? And then you have the sin going forward for the last 2,000 years. You have Nero. Nero's one of his favorite things to do was take Christians and sharpen these poles, and you would be jammed down and between your legs, impaled on a pole. And then he would dip you in tar and light you on fire at night in his garden as he'd be out playing croquet. Hated Christians. All throughout church history, all of the rape, child abuse, all of the horrible stuff of humanity. And then we get to the 20th century, and you have Hitler, you have Stalin. Stalin wiping out, if you include the starvation of the Ukraine, 100 million people. And then you have today, human trafficking. Do you know today there are more people in slavery today than they say than ever was enslaved in America and in Europe? And the average age, I believe, is somewhere between 10 and 12. Boys and girls. Sold as sex slaves today. Maybe you have been a victim of a horrific crime or abuse, or a family member of great injustice, and you know how that just eats on your soul. You got to think about a holy God, who the sin and debauchery of humankind for all of time, okay? All of that sin, if you put it in a cup, Jesus had to drink that. He had to take it on himself and take all of the sin and suffering and the wrath of God on him, and then take it to hell and leave it in hell where it belongs. Okay? So it's interesting that Jesus says this. Jesus says, am I not to drink of this cup? Am I not to do this, Peter? We also find elsewhere, Jesus says, listen, as he's hanging on the cross, don't you think that I could call 10,000 angels to come at any moment and rescue me? Don't you think that I could just have the ground open up and swallow all you people? Don't you think that I could just squish you all like a bug if I wanted to? I created you. I created the whole world. I know the number of hairs on your head. You see. Then it goes on. Then the company of swords commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus and tied him up. So here you see Jews and Gentiles equally sharing in the arrest of Jesus. Throughout history, it's awful. Martin Luther's a big culprit of this. Referred to Jewish people as Christ killers. That's not okay. Jewish people are still God's chosen people today. And we love to point the finger at other people. But what you see here is Jews and Gentiles together play this role, and Pilate plays a role. So you have Jews and Gentiles who are typically enemies. You know the story, the phrase, my enemy's enemies are my friends. They both come together to arrest and crucify Jesus. What that means is all of humanity is culpable. We can't point the finger. They arrest Jesus and tie him up. Man, you just think, here is Jesus, the creator of the world. They arrest him because he claimed to be God, and then they tie him up. Then think about the fact that Jesus was the one who shows up in the fiery furnace and is walking around. They don't think about the pre-incarnate appearances of Jesus Christ throughout the Old Testament. But they tie him up, and they first lead him to Annas, since he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. And then John tells us Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it would be better for one man to die for the people. Remember, Caiaphas has said, listen, if this guy keeps growing in popularity and everybody follows him as Messiah, the Romans are going to come and they're going to kill all of us. So let's just kill him and we can save our nation. And very little, he didn't realize what he was saying was, here's Jesus dying for all of humanity. Now what I want us to think, and I think what John is trying to communicate to us here, is Jesus knew his mission was to come and die. Jesus knew that. He went to a familiar place where Judas knew where he would be. It was Passover. They had to stay inside the city limits. So Jesus went there. He knew that Judas would know where he was. He walks out in front, says, hey, who are you looking for? Says it twice. And he wasn't hiding. They didn't have to put a search party together for him. There he was. He walked right into their hands, willingly went. And what it shows is the unbelievable person of Jesus Christ. He went to his death completely willing. Why? Because he loved you and loved me so much. Remember we began, and I read to you why unity is so important is because the truth is that the Father loves everybody to the same extent that he loves the Son. And Jesus wasn't willing for any to perish. None to perish. And he willingly went to die. And not just die, as we go in the coming weeks, as we lead up to Easter, you're going to see the unbelievable kind of death that he went through. The suffering that he went through. It was profane what they did to him. But he went through and did all of that because somehow we need to know how much we're loved. And I just want to say, every one of us here this morning, if any of you are struggling with sin this morning, anyone struggling with any sin out there? There's one or two maybe. Every struggle we have with sin is due to we don't understand God's love for us. We're going to take communion here in a moment. Jesus willingly did all this. As a man. As a man's man. Didn't shy away from it. He went willingly to say, I love you. Now, I want to read a story here. This is written back in 2004. But I'm reading it because I think it might help us, even with what's going on today, to understand a little bit about what love looks like. Now, we get so easily inoculated against the gospel. You know what I mean by inoculated? You get a little bit of it, but you never catch it full blown. You get a little bit, so you don't get the full disease. And what happens in church is you get a little bit of it every Sunday, but you never fully catch the depth and magnitude of the love of God for you. And so I want to read this. The day is over, you're driving home. You tune in your radio. You hear a little blurb about a little village in India where some villagers have died suddenly, strangely, of a flu that has never been seen before. It's not influenza, but 3 or 4 fellows are dead. It's kind of interesting. They're sending some doctors over there to investigate. You don't think much about it, but on Sunday, coming home from church, you hear another radio spot. Only they say it's not 3 villagers, it's 30,000 villagers in the back hills of this particular area of India, and it's on TV that night. CNN runs a little blurb. People are heading there from the disease center in Atlanta because this disease strain has never been seen before. By Monday morning, you get up, it's the lead story. It's not just India, it's Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran. Before you know it, you're hearing the story everywhere, and they have coined it is now the mystery flu. The president has made some comment that he and everyone are praying and hoping that all will go well over there. But everyone is wondering, how are we going to contain it? That's when the president of France makes an announcement that shocks Europe. He is closing their borders. No flights from India, Pakistan, or any other countries where this thing has been seen. That night, you're watching a little bit of CNN before going to bed. Your jaw hits your chest. When a weeping woman is translated from French news program into English, there's a man lying in a hospital in Paris dying of the mystery flu. It has come to Europe. Panic strikes. As best they can tell, once you get it, you have it for a week and you don't know it. Then you have it for 4 days. Then you have 4 days of unbelievable symptoms, and then you die. Britain closes its borders, but it's too late. Southampton, Liverpool, Northampton, and it's Tuesday morning when the President of the United States makes the following announcement. Due to a national security risk, all flights to and from Europe and Asia have been canceled. If your loved ones are overseas, I'm sorry. They cannot come back until we find a cure for this thing. Within 4 days, our nation has been plunged into an unbelievable fear. People are selling little masks for your face, or are talking about what if it comes to this country, and preachers on Tuesday are saying it's the scourge of God. It's Wednesday night, you're at church at prayer meeting, when someone runs in from the parking lot and says, turn on a radio, turn on a radio. Well, the church listens to a little transmitter radio with a microphone stuck up to it. The announcement is made. 2 women are lying in a Long Island hospital dying from the mystery flu. Within hours, it seems, this thing has just swept across the country. People are working around the clock trying to find the antidote. Nothing is working. California, Oregon, Arizona, Florida, Massachusetts. This is those things sweeping in from the borders. Then all of a sudden, the news comes out. The code has been broken. A cure can be found. A vaccine can be made. It's going to take the blood of somebody who hasn't been infected. And so, sure enough, all through the Midwest, Through all those channels of emergency broadcasting, everyone is asked to do one simple thing. Go to your downtown hospital and have your blood type taken. That's all we ask for. When you hear the sirens go off in your neighborhood, please make your way quickly, quietly, and safely to the hospitals. Sure enough, when you and your family get down there late that Friday night, there's a long line. And they've got nurses and doctors coming out and pricking fingers and taking blood and putting labels on it. Your spouse and your kids are out there. They take your blood type and they say, wait here in the parking lot. And if we call your name, you can be dismissed and go home. You stand around, scared with your neighbors, wondering what in the world is going on. And that is this the end of the world. Suddenly, a young man comes running out of the hospital screaming. He's yelling a name and waving a clipboard. What? He yells it again. Your son tugs on your jacket and says with a grin, Daddy, that's me. Before you know it, they grab your boy. Wait a minute, hold it. And they say, it's okay. His blood is clean. His blood is pure. We want to make sure he doesn't have the disease we think. We've got the right time. 5 tense minutes later, out come the doctors and nurses crying and hugging one another. Some are even laughing. It's the first time you've seen anybody laugh in a week, and an old doctor walks up to you and says, thank you, sir, your son's blood is perfect. From it, we can make the vaccine. As the word begins to spread all across the parking lot full of folks, people are screaming and praying and laughing and crying. But then the gray-haired doctor pulls you and your wife aside and says, may we see you for a moment? We didn't realize that the donor would be a minor, and we need you to sign a consent form. You begin to sign, and then you see that the number of pints of blood to be taken is empty. How many pints, you ask? And that's when the old doctor's smile fades, and he says, we had no idea it was going to be a little child. We weren't prepared. We need it all. But you don't understand. We're talking about the world here. Please sign. We need it all. But can't you give him a transfusion? If we had clean blood, we would. Would you please sign the form? People are dying. In numb silence, you do. Then they say, would you like to have a moment with your son? You go into that room where he sits on the table saying, Daddy, Mommy, what's going on? Can you take his hand and say, son, we love you, and we would never let anything happen to you that just didn't have to be? Do you understand that? When that old doctor comes back in and says, I'm sorry, but we've got to get started. People all over the world are dying. Can you leave? Can you walk out while he's saying, Dad, Mom, why have you forsaken me? And then the next week, when they have the ceremony to honor your son, some folks sleep through it. And some folks don't even come because they go to the lake. And some folks come with a pretentious act. Just a story that kind of hits home right now with what's going on, of how a father would feel having to give up the life of his son. And we don't ever want to be a community of people who take lightly Jesus willingly giving up his life for us. And here is the Father saying, son, you got to take this cup. The sin, all its effects, the total wrath of God on sin, and the son has to take that and die in order to save humanity. And so we want to see here, Jesus went willingly to the cross because he loved us so much. And I don't know whatever you may be struggling with this morning, but as we take communion, I want you to think about it. Maybe look at the cross and think of, envision Jesus being put on the cross. In whatever sin you're struggling with, whatever area of your life that you're having trouble submitting to him, to understand or experience the love of God in that area of your life. You need to understand He willingly died so you could have life. And I hope as we take communion, everyone here enters more deeply into the precious blood of Christ that was shed for us. And the reality is, if you were the only one on the planet, Jesus still would have died. Sometimes with lots of people we get lost. We think, well, maybe Jesus loves the whole crowd, but I don't know if He loves me. No, He loves you and me. In every sin we've ever committed and ever will commit, He personally took on Himself. He embodied the tragedy of it, the wrath of it, the shame of it, the guilt of it, the experience of the pain of it and what it has caused to others. He took all of that on Himself. It's His way to say, you know, I love you that much. And the concept that if we just believe by faith in His sacrifice, our sin is washed away. Gone. Separated as far as the east is from the west. Now, folks, that is love. And I hope as we take communion this morning, you think about that. Of the great love of Christ. Jesus willingly went. He didn't hide. Willingly went. He stepped forward. He took command of the situation. He, even though He knocked them all down with the words out of His mouth, He lets them get back up, ask them again who they're looking for. He didn't resist. Why? Because He loved you that much. And folks, we need to respond to that. How do we respond to that? Worship. Put Him in His rightful place. We owe Him everything. We really do. And the Word of God says He died for us, not so we can live for ourselves, so we'd live for Him. I just want to ask you, are you living for Christ today? Are you advancing His agenda in the world? Or are we stuck on self-obsession where we just care about ourselves? You know, in the story, this dad gives up the life of his son and is so angry that, as it says, people can't even come to a service or be fully present and say thank you. And the way we say thank you to Jesus is say, I surrender to you. And I don't live for you. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just ask that if there's any sin in our hearts, any unconfessed sin this morning, we would examine ourselves. We'd confess that to you right now. That we may experience the relational forgiveness of our sin. As we take communion, it may hit us deeper that the precious blood and body of Jesus Christ had to be broken and shed so we could have life. It's the great exchange. And may it provoke in us a greater desire to worship you. I pray this in Jesus' name. What we're going to do is, as we have some music playing, just as you feel, if there's any business you need to do with God, do that. And then come on up and take the elements, and then we'll be closing in a song.